Hi, I'm back again, and today I'm going to talk about some different acrylic products from Daler and Rowney. Now, many people use Daler and Rowney brushes. I'm sorry about my fingernails. I have just been out in the garden. I'm covered in mud, but I thought before I get in the shower, because I'm going to get covered in paint, I thought I'll do this video now. Excuse the state of my workstation. Yeah, it's covered in crap. I've been painting watercolour for the last week, or gouache actually, as a present for a friend, so my brushes are all out. And I don't really have time to put everything away to make this video, so excuse my unprofessionalism. Now, many people in the UK will be familiar with all the different brands that DNR sell in terms of acrylic, but I discovered when talking to Lindsay the Frugal Crafter, who is an absolute encyclopedia of the different cheap paints you can get hold of, because her speciality really is economy crafting, which is fantastic, and I've learned an awful lot from listening to her channel. So if you don't already know her, please go over there. But I learned from talking to her that not all of the paints we can get in the UK are actually available in the US from this company. So going from top to bottom, many people will be familiar with CRYLA, which is their artist quality professional paint. These tubes retail, I'm going to go with Series A, which is the lowest priced in the series. These tubes, which are 75 millilitres, or for the USA, 2.5 US fluid ounces, in Series A are about £6, £7 in the UK. Now I'm going to put the dollar equivalency in the description, so that people can translate for different countries, because I do think that is quite important to get an understanding of what these prices are like in local currency. So that's the artist grade light fast single pigment colours. This one is 527 light red oxide from Series A, and it is pure pigment red 101. So it's a lovely high quality paint, and everything in the CRYLA range is heavy body. That's really important to me because I personally prefer working with heavy body acrylic if I'm going to use it at all. So that's the top end of the spectrum. After that, we then have System 3, which is the next one down. Now, weirdly, there isn't a kind of usual situation of having artist grade, student grade. Daler and Rowney actually have multiple student grades, weirdly. So they have System 3, which is split into two families. The standard body, which is this one, and the heavy body, which comes with a black cap and a black base to the tube. And 75 milliliter tubes again in System 3, which is basically the good end of student quality, or it is semi-professional or amateur artist quality, I should say, rather than semi-professional. To be honest, in acrylic, this is what I normally use. I use a mixture of this and CRYLA, really. I'm not too fussy about acrylics, but I tend to use the heavy body version. So within these, the family splits in half, and you do have both the heavy body and the standard. And I assumed in my naivety that if we have 503 cadmium red hue, it's going to be the same composition in both the different versions. However, when I actually looked at the back of the tubes, the light body is Naphthol Red ASD, aka Pigment Red 112. The heavy body is Naphthol Red 1TR and Naphthol Red ASD. So it's a mixture of Pigment Red 112 and Pigment Red 5. Sorry, I keep sliding out of frame. I'm not used to filming in this setup. It's a new setup for me, so I'm going to try and keep my hands still. I'm really sorry about that. So they have a slightly different composition. I don't know whether that's what they do, or whether one of these tubes is just older than the other and subsequently has a different pigment blend in it. Maybe they changed it at some stage. Great thing about System 3 is that they're all the same price point. There are no different series within them, and these tubes sell for about £3.50 in my local art store, and they're exactly the same price whether you want heavy body or standard body. The catch is standard body is available in a slightly wider range of colours. I think heavy body is only available in about half of the colours, but it is a very big difference in texture when you're using them. So if you enjoy impasto, the heavy body is a good way of avoiding use of mediums. So then below that, they have a proper student grade, I suppose, Graduate, which is also the brand name of their brushes that I quite like for watercolour. The Graduate brushes are their economy range, I guess, there. But they're not true economy, they're just kind of student range. 537 permanent rose here. This is a 150 milliliter tube, and these sell for about £3. So they're about half the price of the smaller tubes, effectively. per when you look at it per milliliter. Sorry, these are 120 milliliter, I'm sorry. So actually there's not an enormous difference in volume, but they are cheaper. And I'm going to put the prices below because I want to give the latest prices rather than necessarily what I paid for it. This is a single pigment colour, Pigment Red 122, which is a quinacridone rose. It's a perfectly good paint. I mean, the difference really is it's a lower pigment load and they're a little bit runnier, but they're not bad paints. I actually quite like them, and they have an advantage, which is that you can get some colours in Graduate that you can't get in the better grades. One of those being an iridescent white, which I'm going to show you in a minute, I sometimes use. And what I usually do with the Graduate range is these tend to be on offer around Christmas kind of time because they're a lower quality paint, I guess. And what I tend to do is I buy tubes of titanium white and I use it to paint the grounds, and I buy yellow ochre, titanium white, and a few other colours, and I use them to paint the grounds on my canvas before I start, because it's cheaper than wasting something in this grade just to paint the ground, which I'm ultimately going to paint over absolutely all of, and I've never noticed any problems with peeling or flaking even after several years. So that's Graduate. Now most ranges kind of stop there, but what DNR have in the UK, which apparently you can't get in the UK, is this range called Simply, and they sell these sets called Simply Acrylic, and this was about £8 I think in my local art store, and it's a set of 12 milliliter tubes of acrylic. I haven't actually used these are brand new. I have used the oils in the Simply range because I've never painted oil before, and I thought it would be a good way just to kind of have a little play, and actually I really like the oils. I think they're actually really good. You know, pigments aren't brilliant, but they're very heavy bodied. They work. You know, all the techniques I wanted to try them with work perfectly well, just as a kind of way of playing. So I've actually opened one tube of this, and I'll make some comments about the Simply acrylic range in a separate video. I'll do a whole video just on these, but I wanted to do the product comparison really first of all. So what I've done is I've taken a sheet of System 3 acrylic paper from Daler and Rowney, which is a £140 or 230 gram per square metre acrylic paper. So it has one smooth side, which is the back, and it has one side with a tooth to it, which is kind of a canvas texture, and it works pretty well actually. I quite like this as a surface. So what I've done is I've painted on, admittedly not the same colour all the way along because I don't have them, I painted on so that I could see how they went, some of the colours, and what I did with them, if I pop them here, is I used my palette knife, and I'll show you exactly what I did, and I took just a tiny bit of the paint, I squeezed it till a little bulge came just over the top of the tube, I scraped that off, and then what I did is I smeared it down the page as far as it would go, then I stopped and cleaned off my palette knife, and it was this palette knife that I was using, which is a number 2. So over here we have light red oxide, which is the CRYLA professional grade. It went on very smoothly. The coverage here is fantastic, and I'll bring it up into the light in a moment to show you. I then did the heavy and light versions of Cad Red Hue from System 3, and there is a difference actually. The heavy has got a slightly more pink cast to it than the light does. I then did the Permanent Rose from the Graduate one. Now, once you get beyond the heavy body here, these are all very runny paints. So the light body is fairly soft, the Permanent Rose in the Graduate is really soft, and I'm going to show you the paints in a moment. And then I took one of the colours from the Simply range, which is called Brilliant Red, and the coverage is really not very good at all. You can see the tooth of the paper through it, but to be honest, if I gave that a second coat, it would look like this. These are all transparent colours. CRYLA is not a transparent colour, so that's why up at this end I have better quality. So let me bring it right up into the light, and I'm just going to adjust my light so that you can probably, hopefully, see a little bit better. So I'm trying not to shine the light too directly. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little painting trial for you. I tried to fix the lighting and get everything a little bit better. It's still not perfect, and I'm really sorry about that. I have a large fluorescent light between myself and the camera, and I've wrapped it in tissue to soften the lighting a bit, so hopefully this will work a little bit better. And I note that the paper I'm working on is slightly lighter at this end, so I'm going to slide it across so you can see each paint. So what I've got here is another sheet of that paper, which is the System 3 acrylic paper from Daler and Rowney, and I really like this. I like to practice on it. I've given people gifts on it. It's a lovely acid 3 archival quality paper. It is a good alternative to canvas, either for playing and practicing or for colour charts. And to be honest, it's quite nice if you want to give someone a gift they can frame rather than a canvas when you're working in acrylic. I've got here a 3/4 inch flat wash, which is from Daler and Rowney's Simply range. It's a gold Taclon brush, which is a lovely soft synthetic, but it's got enough spring to work well with acrylic. It's not good for oil, it's not good for watercolour, but I really like it actually, and I do a lot of my acrylic work in gold Taclon from the Simply range, so I'm not going to criticise those brushes too much. I think they're absolutely perfectly functional. So I'm going to open up the Simply paints here and open the one that I've opened before. So these come in these little tubes. The first thing to note about the Simply colours is they don't have proper names. So you'll note this is Brilliant Red. It doesn't really focus too well, I'm really sorry. This is Brilliant Red. The other colours in the set don't have the names that we perhaps would be used to as painters. I'm going to read them out actually because that would be a good review of the set, but I'm going to do that in a separate video. I think I'll do a whole video reviewing just that set, and right now stick to comparison. For comparative purposes, the important thing is they don't have proper names, and they also don't tell you what pigments are in them, so there's no way to know what pigments these are. They do tell you the safety information, but they don't tell you what the actual pigments are. I'm going to assume they're all synthetic dyes and that there are no actual pigments at this price. So I'm going to open the tube, and you can almost pour it out the tube. It's actually so soft, and I'm going to just squeeze out the tiniest little amount here. You can see it's quite runny. It's almost a bit like a watercolour from the tube, a cheap watercolour. It's glossy and it's runny. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put out all the different ones, and then when I've done it, I'm going to go back and I'm going to paint them down the page, and we'll have a look at what they look like. So now for the Graduate Permanent Rose. I do have another few colours, but what I couldn't find in my collection was a similar red in every one. So the Graduate's a little bit stiffer, it's a slightly better body, and I'm going to lift this paper up so you can kind of do a body comparison if you like in just a moment. And now on to System 3 at the standard end of the scale, which is quite stiff but not too stiff. I mean, it's a similar consistency to Graduate, if I'm honest. I think the difference is the pigment quality at this stage is what matters. And then the Heavy, which is where we start having to perhaps use a palette knife to cut the paint so that I don't get it stuck to the tube. So you can see, you know, I can cut a disc of the Heavy body. That is a disc rather than a blob of the paint I have cut using my palette knife, and it cuts very easily and cleans up very well as well. And finally, my precious light red oxide. I bought this for a specific painting I was doing where I needed a light red oxide, and there was not an equivalent in the System 3 Heavy, and so I had to spend a bit more money. So you can see again I've cut a disc, and it's almost clay-like. It's so wonderfully thick, and I'm going to need to use a wet brush to be able to get into that really. So I'm going to hold them up now so that you can see what our consistencies are like. So first of all, I'm going to adjust the light again, if you excuse me a moment, and get the focus right. The Simply one is very soft. It's almost gel-like, it's glossy, it's nothing special. Graduate is a little bit better. I wonder if I can perhaps light these from... No. I was going to try and get clever then and light them from behind. It didn't work. There we go. If I light them from the side, that's a bit easy for you to see. Graduate is kind of like toothpaste. It's not too stiff, it's not too thin. The standard body System 3 is kind of similar to the Graduate in consistency, but the pigment load, as you'll see, is higher. And then we've got the 2 heavy body, and if I tip the paper, you can see I've cut pieces of those. I mean, they really are solid blocks. They are very, very, very high quality indeed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start with a dry brush, and I'm going to just move the Simply paint down the page. Okay, and you can see it's lovely and glossy. It's a very, very, very cool red. It doesn't quite go all the way to the bottom. It sort of runs out of oomph after a little while, so you don't get very good coverage, but you know, if you just want to learn the basic techniques with acrylic, that would probably work. Now, I haven't got a cardinal sin of acrylic painting. I don't have a water pot of clean water with me. I have one of filthy water from watercolour, so I'm just going to wipe it on a rag and then continue on my way. So excuse me if I mix the colours slightly. This Graduate one is much thicker. You can feel it's almost like an emulsion paint in terms of its viscosity, and it does give you lovely coverage. So if I continue to paint this down the page, you will see, even though I know I put more on, it was not exactly a fair test. I'm getting a lovely even coverage there, and I will hold that up and show it to you when I've done it. I'm now going to go on to the System 3, and I'm going to show you how they work. I'm just trying to get as much paint off the brush as I can. The standard, lovely and soft. I mean, it's fairly similar to the Graduate, but it just feels to me like it's going on a bit thicker. It's not thinning right out, and it just seems to give a lovely even coat that you don't really get with the Graduate. It's worth mentioning these do all mix quite well together between the series. You can mix them, as I'm sort of mixing on the page the Graduate with the System 3 there, just to show that it can be done really. I do mix them sometimes, but if you mix them, they will tend to go the way of the Graduate and become a lighter, sort of thinner body. Heavy body now. Oh, look at that. Isn't it just the most wonderful, thick paint? For Impasto, it is just fantastic. It leaves brush strokes brilliantly. It doesn't give you the evenness, perhaps, of the light body because it holds brush strokes. So if, like me, you want to see the brush strokes, or you're doing Impasto and you don't want to keep having to fork out for mediums, there you go. There's your solution. So I'll just clear up the mess I have just made, and now I will show you the final, the CRYLA, which is a wonderful, you know, it's hard to actually break up that lump without really working it with the brush. It is like brushing clay. It is really wonderful and thick, and it holds brush strokes brilliantly, and again for Impasto it works, but obviously you can get oil-like methods, but it will dry far more quickly, and I'm just going to show that you can blend it quite well into the heavy body System 3 there. I'm not doing a very good job with the blending because I'm not trying. I just wanted to show that they are kind of compatible, but because the pigment load is so much higher in the CRYLA, it will always take over. So bear that in mind if you are using them together, that the pigment load being higher at this end of the scale means these paints will tend to take over what's at this end, which you can see quite well when I paint a bit of CRYLA over the top. You know, it's just the pigment load is so high, it will obliterate anything that is underneath. So there we have a reasonable demonstration, and I'm going to have to go and wash my brush now, which is annoying, as I hate washing brushes when I've used acrylic. It's my least favourite thing when painting ever. I'm going to play with my lighting a little bit more here, try and give you some better light, and I'm sorry my lighting has been so terrible recently. I am trying to get some soft boxes in so that it will be better in the future for you. So there we have it. How's that look? That's a little bit better. It's a bit bleached, but you know, you can still see it. So you can see there the Simply has got a reasonable coverage, followed by the Graduate, and when you get up to CRYLA there's so much paint that it's actually difficult to get it all off of your brush. So